Have you ever stopped to think about, well, what stories from history often just don't get told? You meet the acts of bravery or sacrifice that kind of vanish, especially when they happen in the shadows of big conflicts.
That's a really important question, and it's something this deep dive is actually set up perfectly to explore today.
Yeah, exactly. Today, we're diving into Kristin Hannah's novel, The Women. It's incredibly powerful. Our goal here is to give you a shortcut to understanding its really impactful take on American women in the Vietnam War.
And crucially, what happened to them when they came home, that lack of acknowledgement.
Right. We've got some great excerpts and reviews of the book itself as our sources for you.
And Kristin Hannah, well, she's really the ideal author for this. She's known for highlighting the strength and also the struggles of women in her historical fiction. You probably know her work.
Oh, yeah, like The Nightingale, World War II Resilience.
Exactly. Or The Four Winds, about surviving the Dust Bowl. She really knows how to bring these experiences to life.
And with The Women, she really digs deep, doesn't she, into the scars of war, the quiet legacy of the women who were there.
It feels less like just a novel and more like setting the record straight, a necessary reclamation, as you said.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's unpack the narrative heart of The Women. It all revolves around Frances McGrath, right? Frankie.
Yeah, that's right. Frankie. She's a young woman, comes from a pretty conservative upper-class family, Southern California.
And she grows up with this ingrained idea, this belief that war is, well, it's a man's job.
Absolutely. Women are expected to stay behind, be supportive, but quiet. That's the world she knows.
But something changes for her.
Yeah, her world gets completely shaken up by a tragedy. And that, combined with this sort of emerging sense of purpose,
it pushes her.
Pushes her to do what?
To basically defy everything she was raised to believe. She enlists, becomes an army nurse. She wants to serve, just like her brother did.
Wow. And Vietnam, I imagine it's not what she expected. The book doesn't sugarcoat it, does it? No, not at all. Hannah is unflinching. She shows Frankie being, the sources say, broken and remade by the sheer brutality of it.
Yeah.
It's not about romanticizing her courage.
So how does Hannah convey that raw reality without, just making it relentlessly bleak or making Frankie seem totally defeated?
That's a really good point. It's about the detail, I think. The sources highlight this grim, chaotic feel in the field hospitals, close to the front lines.
Right.
So Frankie's constantly dealing with, well, blood, trauma, body bags, screaming, wounded soldiers. It's relentless. Hannah uses these stark details, but she balances it. You see Frankie's internal strength, her resilience, even as she's cracking under the weight of it all.
So it's not a sudden break, more a slow transformation.
Exactly. You see her finding the will to just keep going day after day.
Yeah.
You feel that immense psychological burden, especially since she had so little support or, frankly, recognition for what she was enduring.
It sounds absolutely harrowing, but there's another side too, isn't there? The bonds between the women?
Yes, that's crucial. Frankie isn't completely alone. She forms these really intense friendships with other nurses. Ethel and Barb are key figures.
Right, Ethel and Barb. How do they fit in? Are they just friends or something more? Like, do they represent different ways of coping?
Definitely more than just friends. Their friendship provides this rare and precious relief from the war's cruelty. It's essential. Ethel, she's described as the fierce protector.
Okay.
Tough, always looking out for others. A real rock. Barb is different, more of a free spirit, finds her release in maybe rebellion, pushing boundaries.
So they show different survival strategies.
Exactly. They represent these different but equally important ways of dealing with the horror. And sharing those experiences, it forges this incredibly strong bond. It's like a lifeline. A kind of quiet shared heroism, maybe, supporting each other when the system offered basically nothing.
And then they come home, and that's when, as you said, the real battle might just be beginning for them.
Precisely. The book calls Frankie's homecoming purgatory compared to the hell of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Which tells you a lot.
Purgatory? Wow. And it's different for them than for the male veterans.
That's the really disturbing part. The contrast is stark.
Yeah.
Male veterans, look, they absolutely faced huge struggles and weren't always welcomed home as heroes either. We know that.
Right.
But they were at least acknowledged. Their service was seen, even if it was debated or criticized. Women like Frankie. The sources say they were just ignored.
Ignored? How?
Their service was outright questioned. People didn't believe they'd really been in it. Their mental health issues were dismissed. Their voices silenced.
So no support groups, no VA help?
Often, no. Not like the men. They weren't welcomed as heroes. They were just
Yeah.
made invisible, a complete erasure. It's shocking, really.
It's like adding another layer of trauma onto the first one.
No.
And you see Frankie struggling because of this.
Oh, absolutely. The book depicts her downward spiral so powerfully. She tries to build a normal life back home. Relationships, jobs.
But it doesn't work.
It's incredibly difficult. She even resorts to numbing herself with drugs and alcohol at points. That trauma she carries is immense.
And society refusing to even see it, let alone validate it.
Oh, pushes her into this profound isolation. Hannah shows it through Frankie's inner thoughts, that feeling of being a complete outsider.
Right.
She just can't connect with people who have no clue what she endured.
So that idea that her second war begins the day she returns, it's literal in a way.
It really is. It's this quiet internal battle for her own sanity, her own worth, but fought completely alone. No camaraderie like in Vietnam, no clear enemy, just silence and dismissal.
So thinking about this today, Hannah's using history as more than just a setting, right? She's holding up a mirror.
Definitely. She's critiquing that historical narrative, the one that just erased women.
Mm-hmm.
And she forces us, you, the reader, to question what we even mean by heroism.
What's the core insight there? What does she make us confront about heroism?
I think she forces us to see that heroism isn't just about, visible acts of courage on a battlefield. It's also about that grinding, invisible fight for recognition after, the kind Frankie fought.
That quiet endurance against being forgotten.
Exactly. And the book dives into all these related themes: identity, belonging, survivor's guilt, mental illness, and that long, hard road towards healing. It really asks, if your service isn't even acknowledged, does it still count? Is it still valued?
It's a heavy question. Now, beyond Frankie's story and the historical critique, the sources also talk a lot about Hannah's writing itself, her craft.
Yes, and that's what really makes the novel hit so hard. The literary elements are crucial.
Like what, for example? The sources mention her pacing.
Yeah, she's called a master of pacing.
Yeah.
And you feel it. She can throw you right into the chaos of a mayor's unit. The blood, trauma, screaming wounded soldiers, using these short, sharp descriptions. And then just when you feel overwhelmed, she'll shift, pull back into a quiet, almost poetic internal thought from Frankie, maybe just staring out at the jungle.
That shift, it does something to you as a reader.
It's like psychological whiplash.
Yeah.
It makes you feel the disconnection, the internal chaos these nurses must have experienced. It's not just telling, it's showing through technique. Really visceral.
That makes sense. And symbolism too, like Frankie's uniform.
Yeah, that's a powerful one. It starts as this badge of pride, right, when she enlists. But after she comes home, it becomes almost a mark of trauma.
Symbolizing both the courage and the burden.
Exactly. And the ocean imagery is mentioned too. It's not just a backdrop.
How so?
Well, it reflects Frankie's inner state. Calm on the surface, chaotic underneath. Just like society wanted these women to appear composed, put together.
While ignoring the storm raging inside.
Precisely. It emphasizes how hidden their suffering was, mirroring that invisibility they faced from the world. It's all internal, isolated.
There's a part of the book reviewers really highlight when Frankie finally connects with other women veterans.
Ah, yes. That's described as maybe the most moving section. And for good reason.
What makes it such a turning point?
Well, think about it. For years, Frankie felt invisible, like her experience was unique, maybe even something to be ashamed of, alone in her suffering.
Right.
But in that moment, meeting others who get it, who lived it too, who bear the same scars, she realizes something profound. She wasn't just invisible, she was actively silenced. There's a difference. It shifts her understanding from this purely personal burden to a shared collective truth.
And that recognition that community is key to healing.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
It underscores how vital community and shared truth are. Finally finding validation, even if it's just within that small group, after years of dismissal. It's incredibly powerful.
And Hannah's writing style throughout described as fluid and emotionally gripping. It sounds like she makes you feel it, not just read about it.
She really does. The dialogue feels real and lived in. The settings are vividly painted. You believe these characters, you ache for them.
Are there specific moments or scenes that really stick with you?
The sources mention scenes that readers won't forget, like a blood-soaked hospital floor, or a moment of complete breakdown in a mundane place like a grocery store.
Wow.
Or maybe just a quiet moment with a fellow veteran who simply understands without needing words. Those moments land hard.
And it's grounded in reality. The historical accuracy is praised.
Very much so. It's clear Hannah clearly did her homework. Real events, military operations, the political climate back home, the protests, the anger, the confusion of a divided nation. It's all woven in.
So it's more than just a story.
It really feels like a reclamation of lost stories, bringing this hidden history into the light.
So if we compare it to her other big novels, The Nightingale about bravery, The Four Winds about survival, what's the core theme of The Women?
I think it's about visibility, truth, and the long road toward justice. It's definitely not a romantic story. It's not an easy read by any means.
But necessary.
Absolutely necessary.
Right.
Hannah's written something that yet breaks your heart, but it also demands that you don't look away this time.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, The Women is this incredibly powerful, emotional, often brutal, but honest look at a generation of women basically written out of the narrative of war.
Yeah, it really challenges you to confront those forgotten truths, to understand that patriotism, sacrifice, bravery, they weren't just male experiences.
Especially from those who weren't even allowed to tell their own stories afterwards.
Exactly.
Which leaves us and you with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? How do we as a society actually make sure that the patriotism, the sacrifice, the bravery of everyone who serves, especially those whose stories have been pushed aside or silenced, how do we make sure they are truly seen, heard, and remembered?
Right, so that we don't repeat this.
Right.
So that no future service goes unrecognized, unvalidated, leaving another generation to fight that second war all alone. Our sources pointed to was how the women gave voice to stories often overlooked, specifically military nurses in Vietnam.
Right, that aspect.
Yeah. Before this book, a lot of readers, even veterans, felt those contributions were kind of invisible in the wider culture. We saw comments in the sources, loads of them, saying the book finally acknowledged these women. It was huge validation.
Wow. So not just a novel, but almost like an affirmation for them?
Precisely. For many, it felt like affirming a reality that hadn't really been seen or talked about for decades.
So filling a historical gap in a way, did that validation then maybe lead to, I don't know, a sense of community or even healing perhaps?
That's where it gets really compelling. The sources showed tons of examples where the book acted as a catalyst.
A catalyst? How so?
Well, sparking online discussions, book clubs focusing on it, even actual reunions, believe it or not. Readers who maybe hadn't talked much about their Vietnam experiences found a space, to share their own stories.
That's incredible.
Yeah, there was one story in the sources about former nurses reconnecting because of the book decades later, finding real healing in that shared understanding. It shows how a book can, build bridges.
That is really powerful. And thinking beyond those who lived it directly, did the sources touch on whether it connected different generations, like sparking conversations about the war between, say, parents and kids?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
That was another key finding. Younger readers' daughters, granddaughters mentioned how the women helped them talk to older family members about Vietnam.
Opening doors that might have been closed.
Exactly. Topics that were maybe too difficult before. The book became this common ground. It made history feel very personal, very immediate for a new generation.
So it wasn't just reading history, it was more like sharing an emotional journey.
Right, kind of fulfilling that idea from the source about honoring these stories together, making those hidden histories visible.
What a ripple effect. Okay, so the main takeaway seems clear. The power of a story like The Women isn't just the text itself. It's how it resonates, how it gets people sharing their thoughts, talking about what stuck with them.
It's that emotional and intellectual spark that goes beyond the page.
Yeah.
And if you zoom out, that act of talking about these stories is vital. The sources are pretty explicit.
What's that?
The more we talk about them, the more they live on.
Right. It's not passive reading.
No, it's active participation.
Yeah.
Keeping the narrative alive, ensuring its legacy through, collective dialogue.
Which leads us to a final thought for you listening. Think about what it really means for a story to live on through discussion. How do our shared conversations, even about experiences we haven't had ourselves, shape how we understand these big human experiences and their lasting impact? It's something to consider how a book becomes this living thing through the stories we tell about it.